Hi,
Hello,
I'm Julian.
I'm Tom.
We are Team Binge. We're here to talk about Severance, Season 2, Episode 6. This one was called Attila. Tom, we're a little late on this one due to the fact that we had a Orbito?
Ortbo.
Okay, we went on a little, we'll call it a camping trip. We had a good time. We apologize for being late. We know tens of people were worried about us, but we are alive and ready to go. Tom, we got back. We didn't even unpack our gear. We just watched this show. How did you appreciate episode 6?
I enjoyed it. I felt like we didn't make any major headway, but we definitely had a lot of conversations that I think we desperately needed, especially with Helly and Mark. I'm glad they didn't bring that out for multiple episodes of Mark not telling Helly about their relations they had while on said Ortbo. And we definitely get a lot more of reintegration and what that is going to kind of come to, because it was very slow burn in the start, but now it seems like we are hitting it hot and heavy.
Sure, sure.
How about
Yeah,
you? What do you think?
speaking of hot and heavy, I would like to talk about this show as a whole because as I watched this episode, I started to think, okay, do we watch Severance and are we just looking for entertainment and oh, this show is weird and oddball and there's mystery? Or is this show posing moral quandaries to us about who we are and what a soul is and whether or not you can separate a soul from the body? And Tom, you know me. I know I love nothing more than a moral quandary and discussing deep things. And what I mean by that is really judging whether or not people are doing things right or wrong.
Of
That's
course.
where I come from. So as I was watching this, let me ask you this, Tom. Do you watch this show from a just pure entertainment, mystery, or do you feel like it's trying to touch some deeper meanings?
I feel like I'm watching it more so for the mystery and just how brilliantly it's shot, but the whole concept of severed, to be able to separate your memories from what is your work life versus your personal life, is quite fascinating. And I would feel it's a disservice if they don't attempt to explore the nature of a soul, especially when we saw in the last episode the kind of quote unquote killing of Irving and Annie Irving. I think it's kind of fascinating that they're kind of diving into it a bit.
Sure. So with this episode, and maybe I should just watch it from an entertainment mystery and just kind of touch on the other stuff, but with this episode we have some parallel storylines that all have to deal with intimacy and love between two people. And so you have Dylan meeting with Gretchen and her kind of realizing she's more into the innie than the outie. And what does that mean in terms of, are those two separate people? She clearly sees a separation between the two because she likes one more. Maybe I'm painting with a broad stroke there, but that's how I understood it. And then you have Bert and Irving meeting together, and there's clearly something that happened with their innies, and their outies are trying to discover that and whether or not those are the same people. And even Fields brings up I bet you two your innies had relations. That was interesting. And then obviously you have Mark and Helena, and so they're drawing this parallel of hey, if you love an innie or if you love an outie, does that mean it's the same person? There's even a conversation about the church recognizes that an innie has its own soul, which I thought was an interesting discussion. And so all of this is, here's where I landed. All of this is really interesting within the concept of the show and what they're pitching, but Severance isn't real in real life. So why am I having this discussion? Is this something that's actually important, or this is a fictional world where Severance doesn't exist? Does this have ties to the real world? And so I thought it was interesting that they are paralleling all that. I did not feel like this episode, you said it lightly, I'll say it a little bit more strongly. I don't feel like we really got anywhere in this episode. It was more of a, hey, let's make you all think deeply about what these romantic relationships mean in terms of innies and outies. Does that make sense? Or
No, I think it does. I mean, you can argue like people in the real world, like their work personas versus their like at home or personal are quite different, and maybe that's playing at that a little bit. But we've clearly seen that the leaders at Lumen don't see these innies as really even people or like a lesser version of the rowdy. So I like that we are kind of getting each of these characters having to wrangle with their decisions and how they're I guess, relating to both the innie and outie versions.
So to your point about us being different at work and being different at home, if this is just like a deep exploration of the term like work husband or work wife, which I think is an internet thing, I will be a little bit disappointed. But I found myself thinking a little bit too deeply about what the show was trying to tell me, only to pull out and be like, wait, Severance isn't real, so I don't have to tackle this moral quandary. And so, anyways,
Yet,
exactly. I found this episode interesting. There was parts of it that I wanted to fast forward through just because I was uncomfortable, but, that's my issue, not the show's issue. So,
yeah. But hey, I mean, the show worked, right? If it's making you think a little bit harder, even at the end of it, your conclusion is like, why am I thinking about it? It's doing its job if you're thinking deeper about it.
Well, I disagree. I could just turn on Shoresy and not think and laugh. So I don't know. That show really does its job. But anyways, so let's start this episode. They give us the recap or the fade in of Miss Casey doing talking about the facts about Mark, and it ends with that line, your outie is going to, and then blank. And then we're with Mark and Dr. Ragavi.
You got it.
I got there. And he is like worried about her being tortured because he does not understand why she is repeating this like mantra about his outie. And Dr. Ragavi's conclusion is, oh, she's essential. That's why they're doing this to her, and you need to get her out. And I did not know why she jumped to that conclusion, or are we just is Dr. Ragavi the person that is just telling us that she's still alive? Like she is the proof that he's not chasing a ghost at this point.
Yeah, I think Ragavi is trying to give Addie Mark, a push to keep going with his procedure. Because I feel like more and more throughout this episode, Ragavi doesn't seem to care for Mark at all. Like she's just immediately jumping through these hoops or jumping through these things to hit a means that we maybe don't know her true motivation. Because we know she wants to maybe take down Lumen or whatever else, but she seems to have more to it. And she is certainly in this episode putting Mark's life at risk very quickly.
Well, one could argue if you believe her motivation is purely selfish, if you can be the person that discovers how to reintegrate someone or pull someone out of Severance, there's probably some, as you like to put it, cold, hard coin that's coming that person's way. So sure. I don't know if this is more she is just trying to discover whether or not she can do this procedure, and Mark's the guinea pig, which Petey was before. But yeah, you're right. She does do some things that are recklessly not in the interest of Mark's health. We'll just say that.
Yeah. Needles into brains is what I'm thinking about.
Yes, exactly. Which is real fun to watch, especially as my spouse pointed out, that needle's as wide as his head. Like it'd be going through the other side. Anyways, so we also have a discussion with Dylan, Helly, and Mark. And this is where Dylan is revealed that Irv left him the directions to the hallway and that there is another floor. I love the moment where Helly calls them both out for being cowards. It was great to see old Helly back.
And it's interesting here too, where we get Dylan kind of telling them half truths because he's still friends with these people, but he doesn't want to lose the privileges that he has with seeing Gretchen here. So he just kind of abruptly walks out of this conversation after giving them a nugget of wisdom that they'll likely Helly will action.
Sure. I don't know how I feel where the show is like, hey, when we hit a lull, we're just going to put Mark in this weird cutting back and forth. You know, I guess it's the process of reintegrating, right? That's what he's... But it does feel like whenever we hit a lull, they're just like, all right, we're going to hit Mark with a headache, and we're going to flash back and forth. It's going to look cool, but we're not getting any farther with what that means, I guess, in terms of each one of those scenes. But it is pretty trippy to watch.
Well, and my question is, when he does go through this reintegration thing and it cuts back and forth, it will eventually cut us as an audience to either his innie or his outie, usually the opposite one that we're cutting back and forth with. But then what is happening to his innie during that conversation? Like if he does cut back and forth and then it cuts to him as an outie, is he just sitting there in like silence? Like how long is this process on each side?
Well, in the show, there's some trickery here because the doctor asks him, "Where were you?" And he's like, I was at Lumen, like White Walls, whatever. She makes a comment of like, "Oh, those are memories, and as we get closer, the time will shrink, and you will like be in the present essentially, because he can't be as an innie and as an outie at the same time. Physically, he can't be down there because we've watched him. Unless the show is tricking us, we have physically watched him go to Lumen. And so there's some trickery here. And Tom, it comes down to the timey-wimey of it all that you and I always get into in these shows. But she kind of tries to explain it away that those are memories, but the way the show is shot, it feels like he's in two different places, but his consciousness is flipping back and forth, which...
Yeah, it's a fair point. You're right.
Yeah. So thank you, Tom. Jimmy, can you cut that out and just maybe put it on a loop and send it to my iPod? Thank you. All right. Let's talk Gretchen and Dylan. They are having a conversation. This is Innie Dylan and his outie's wife, Gretchen. And... we kind of find that Dylan's outie, we just feel worse and worse for him. Like, he seems like a good guy. He seems like he tries, but Gretchen seems like she's about had it with him. We find out that he's got a lot of hobbies. He's making beer in the garage. And Innie Dylan's like, my outie sounds awesome. And Gretchen is just on the cusp of being like, he's really not. He's a terrible partner. But I'm not going to tell you that. And this is where we get this. She is obviously a little bit more in to Innie Dylan than outie Dylan. And I found the dynamic weird, but this is once again where the parallels of who is who, and are these the same Dylan or are there souls for each?
Yeah, and it's wild to think of it from each of their perspectives, because like from Gretchen's perspective, she's just seeing a kind of blank slate version of the man she knows and loves and married and had kids with. Yet for Innie Dylan here, he's seeing somebody that, like, he's just learning that he has this relationship with, and he just wants to be with her all the time, together with her all the time. And man, is that creating a just deeper divide between the Innie outie versions of Dylan, only to be, have Gretchen lie to him in the next scene when we see him with outie Dylan.
Right. And I did not like the intimacy here. He like asks for a hug, and then that hug obviously turns to a kiss, and then Tom, we all know what kisses turn to. Kisses turn to sharing vessels, and then sharing vessels turn into dancing, and we all know dancing is a sin. So
can't have that.
I did not like this progression.
Claire is practicing her breathing for her upcoming yoga retreat in Bali. Has she ever done yoga before? No. But Claire worked with Empower on her savings and investment strategy. She got good at money, so she can be a little bad. Empower. Invest well, live a little. Join our 19 million customers today at empower.com.
Past performance is not indicative of future returns. Investing involves risks. You may lose money. Advisory services are provided for a fee by Empower Advisor Group, LLC, EAG, a registered investment advisor with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Om Namaste.
Children's Dimetapp knows the sick day struggle is real. But it doesn't have to be. When sickness strikes, Children's Dimetapp works safely and quickly to relieve cough and other cold symptoms. And your kiddos won't run from its yuck-free sweet grape flavor. Trusted by parents for over 50 years. Children's Dimetapp, your stress-less sick day solution. Use as directed.
We catch up with our guy, Milchick, who is still reeling from his performance review. And he brings in Miss Huang. And I got the sense, and maybe I should have picked this up in the other episode, but is Miss Huang the complainant?
Oh, I think so. And I think he clearly knows that. Like, he is saying all these big words just for the sake of it, as he is kind of trying to put her in her place, I think.
Sure. Have I already thrown the theory? Is it possible that Miss Huang is a child version of Miss Casey? Is that, am I allowed to ask that? Is that
I think that's a theory
possible?
that's a theory that's been thrown out there. We don't really know.
It's not a new theory? I didn't come up with it on my own, Tom? The internet has this theory?
I don't know. We can go back and check the tapes, but who's got the time?
Okay. Yeah, let's just say that I came up with it for the first time here, and you were dazzled by my brilliance. Can we agree to that?
Yes, you're right, Julian.
Thank you. Jimmy, cut that one out too. Loop it, please. Can you connect it with the other one? Maybe do like a drum beat behind it. All right. He says something like, hey, the only way you're going to graduate from the winter and become wintertide material? I was like, what? What is going on here? These are words that don't mean anything to us. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming they will, or is this just more of his big wordishness?
I would imagine maybe a combination of both, because he does make enough like detailed comments where it's maybe more the inner workings of what's going on in the company and how you like the fact that you can quote unquote graduate from her role is unique and interesting.
Sure.
But yeah, I think he's just going very hard and heavy at the big words, trying to kind of call her out and say, hey, I know it was you, kind of a deal.
And that's where we get the you need to eradicate childish folly. Which,
great line.
Eventually we see turns into grow up, you know?
Mm-hmm. Just grow, really.
Well, and when he's saying that in the mirror, when he's saying grow, is he talking to himself? Is he talking about what he should have said to her? What did you get in that moment?
This whole sequence of Milchick, right? So he's doing a handful of things. We see him go into the side room and he's practicing his paper clipping, and his hands are kind of like shaking. Is it shaking from him just being like so angry about having to do this? Is it because he just did 500 different paper clips? I'm not sure. But he does the same kind of like punishment thing he did to Helly in season 1, where like they're looking through that mirror or plate glass and then having her repeat the same words over and over again as like her punishment. He's kind of doing to himself in a mirror as opposed to like a see-through glass. And I think he's still trying to toe that line. Like he knows this company is wild and crazy from the artwork he got, from this performance review that he had, that he's just trying to force himself and push himself into becoming what Lumen wants him to be.
Sure. So whereas we were debating whether or not he was kind of fraying at the seams, this is definitely him committing to, I'm going to take my performance review, I'm going to fix the things they told me I was wrong at, and I'm going to be a company man, right?
I think it's him trying to do it, but I feel like the way we see him going about this by himself, like in a room, it still seems to me that he is struggling to be this person who wants him to be.
Sure. Tom, how do you feel about paper clipping? What's your paper clip like rate? How many paper clips an hour? No, let's go a minute. How many do you think you can do a minute?
I mean, I can probably get through, and it depends on which side, right? If I don't care which side I'm facing it, then I can probably get through 100.
Tom, correct. You think you can do 100? You can paper clip 100 times in a minute?
Yeah. I can get through 1.35 in 1 second. No problem.
Oh, Tom, that's like if you're doing 100 a minute, that's like a paper a second. I don't know, man. That's
I'm pretty good, man. How about you? What are you thinking? What do you think you're pulling down?
I don't know, like 10, and then I get bored and I go watch TV. I think is probably where I'm at.
I'm a staple man. I'll just do it one staple through.
You're a staple man. I'm a hammer and a nails guy, actually. I put the paper on the desk. I put the hammer in the nail. Might use a electric or a air compressed brad nailer to really put it down. And then I don't pass those papers out. You have to come to my desk to read them because they're permanently affixed. Anyways, all right. So let's talk Helly and Mark, because this is the conversation that really develops this, and we'll just say climaxes this episode.
Oh, goodness.
He
Love
said uncomfortably. Oh, all right. First off, they're talking in a bathroom stall. This, much like dancing, sometimes doesn't lead to the greatest of things, but it is what it is.
They have a history of this. They have a history of having pointed conversations in the bathroom because they have some semblance of privacy, at least they assume.
Sure. I appreciate stall conversations when there's a wall between the two people. I don't, when they're in anyways, let's move on. Mark lets her know that they shared vessels, and Tom, I would like to elect that, much like tying shoes, we take on this term sharing vessels and use it because we are a clean podcast. A podcast for children, some would say. A childish podcast.
I agree. I like it. I like when he first said that, I'm like, oh, does he not know what like the word sex is? So this is what he used. But then he does kind of very quickly say that. So I love the innocence of any Mark goes the vessel line first.
Jimmy, can you bleep out where Tom said sex, please? Thank you. For now on, just insert shared vessel there. Thank you, Jimmy. Okay. It's good to have you back, buddy. Okay.
He's getting overtime today.
Yes, he is. Yeah, he's really working for his meal. Voucher, coupon. It's not a whole meal. We don't have that kind of money. But, so, obviously Helly is confused because, and she talks about it, and he shares, I wanted to share vessels with you. I did not know it was not you. Helly also obviously wanted to share vessels with Mark, and she was not a part of it. So, understandably, she is upset, and I can understand that. I don't want to dive too deep into this, but this is once again, they're bringing up a moral quandary, and you're like, oh, this is kind of an interesting thought, but severance isn't real, so I quickly abandoned thinking about this too hard, but I appreciate what they're putting in front of us and how this is a difficult relationship, something that these two they eventually get by it in this episode. But just great acting on both. What?
This didn't happen to you in college?
No, Tom.
You weren't severed?
Severance wasn't invented in college, no.
But I did. I liked the way both characters and portrayals of the actors, handle it. And again, I'm glad we didn't have Mark holding on to this secret for a while, and then it becoming some cliffhanger or whatever at the end of the season. I'm glad they addressed it quickly. And there was a bunch of other rumors too online of they shared vessels, so they're going to have some sort of pregnancy later on that's going to be hers, and she's not going to know about it. And it's man, that would have been a really goofy and dumb storyline. So I'm glad they didn't do it and brought the characters together here.
Sure. Yes. The other thing that I think is important to mention is how Helly comes to the conclusion of, hey, I hate that Helena can control me, and I want my own memory. She's taken something that I wanted from me. And this leads to them going and sharing vessels. And that plastic sheeting, Tom, it doesn't breathe. It's terrible tent material. It's going to trap moisture on the inside. Quite frankly, just a terrible idea. But these two crazy kids are new at this, so they share vessels. This went on for a while, Tom, and it was intimate. We'll just say that.
It's trying to parallel what they had in the tent. And obviously we just recently had it in other episodes. So I don't think they needed to spend as much time. And it was a lovely moment. But I almost got the sense that they were going to do kind of a gross thing. And okay, they're finally going to get together, both the Annie versions of them. But then he was going to have his little kind of outie flashback switch back and forth thing while they were sharing vessels. I'm oh, that would have been brutal. Yeah,
no, this whole thing, once again, severance isn't real. So I'm just going to not think about it and move on, but it is an interesting concept in the show. This all leads to a shared nosebleed and Miss Huang doing some nursing, and I think she's do you want me to shove petroleum jelly up your nose? I was that's not how you handle nosebleeds. What kind of a medical company is this?
We don't know what her formal training is, but she took blood pressure well enough.
Did she? Did she take blood pressure well enough, Tom?
Oh.
I don't know. I just like that she was like, what were you doing when the nosebleed occurred? And Ellie's like, data refining something. I mean, it happened in the hallway. You could have just said we were walking in the hallway when it happened.
Yeah.
But his blood was all over her, so I understood why she was a little bit nervous. All right, let's go from that and have some more fun with Outie Mark as he is being worked on by Dr. Tom. How are you with medical stuff in shows? Do you get queasy? Does it bother you when someone opens up someone's skull and you can see their brain?
I'm generally okay with it, but yeah, I didn't expect the this episode to get as graphic as it did when she later kind of does the procedure on him.
Yeah. We find out, she says something like, we need to speed up the process, right? And she's going to flood the chip?
Yeah, and this is where, again, I'm just like, she clearly, to me, does not care about Mark's safety, and she kind of has her own motivations. But yeah, I guess hemorrhage it by flooding it, I don't know, and it causes Mark to kind of freak out.
Yeah, he's like, no, I'm going to stop this. I'm going to go eat. And he goes, you know what sounds good? Asian food. So I'm going to go get some Asian food at the local Kier Diner. And he goes, none of these restaurants ever have a whole lot of people in them, Tom. The diner, pretty scarce. This Asian food restaurant, pretty scarce. The only person that shows up is, wouldn't you know it, Helena. Helena shows up. I love that she's like, you seem hungry. Did you get enough? And there's like 8 plates on the table. Yeah. Apparently brain surgery makes you hungry.
Well, he hasn't had it yet.
Oh, he hasn't had it yet. Fair enough. The anticipation of brain surgery makes you hungry. What's going on here? This is purposeful. Like, all of this stuff is purposeful. This is not a chance meet and greet at the local diner, right?
Yeah, like Helena knows what she's doing. Like, she even later like mentions the wife's name, like, "Oh, I'm sorry that you lost Hannah in that car accident." And like, well, she clearly knows it's Gemma. Like, what? I don't really know what to take.
Tom, people mistake names all the time. It's okay. We should forgive them. In this situation, Helena forgot Gemma's name and called her Hannah. It's very human, Tom. In fact, a lot of people are saying it's a form of higher intelligence if you forget people's names and mispronounce it. That's what a lot of smart people are saying.
Okay. I'm assuming this is in reference to your Miss Casey bungles.
Oh, Tom, I hadn't even remembered that. I'd forgotten all about that incident that we got 30 emails on. My bad, you know?
But I don't know. I don't know what to make and what is Helena's angle here, as opposed to just maybe trying to get closer to Mark and figure out what he's going on. But there were a lot of like weird flirty looks and awkward stares. I didn't really know what either character was, what their motivation, what they're thinking is.
She romantically has feelings for him, correct?
I mean, I guess so, right? Since
they shared
took over
vessels.
Yeah,
and she knew that was going to happen and encouraged it. So I don't know what's happening here with Helena, if this is just her chance to like re-meet with Mark, maybe have the same connection with his Outie. I did find it interesting that she mentions that her dad was the one that invented the severance procedure. So like obviously like the Egan's long line, but the severance, we kind of get a timeline on it in this episode between the Bert conversation and this conversation. So I thought that was interesting. Tom, did you have any final thoughts on this restaurant before we leave it and maybe don't return to it?
They do one cut as like Mark's getting out into his car where they show the restaurant name. It's like Khufu. But they, again, just the brilliance of the show, they have like the KU of the restaurant name is like the neon light is black versus the FU is like working properly. So it just continues to show the dichotomy of like half lit up and half your mind and body. I love that extra little nod.
Okay. I would argue maybe they just didn't have enough money on set in order to pay the electric bill for all 4 letters. They just went halvesies. And they're
also
like,
possible.
We shouldn't light up the FU one. That'll give people the wrong impression. So they did the KU ones. But
this episode is brought to you by Shopify. Upgrade your business with Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning fewer carts going abandoned and more sales going cha-ching. So if you're into growing your business, get a commerce platform that's ready to sell wherever your customers are. Visit shopify.com to upgrade your selling today.
He gets freaked out during this conversation, and I'd like to talk about why, or because he goes to his car, he drives home, and he's like, "Let's do it. I want to be reintegrated." So, and we had the debate in my house of how much does he know? How much of his Audi knows about Helena? Like, his Audi doesn't know she tricked him and like went incognito into the innies, right?
I don't know, because I feel like all we've gotten really of what Audi Mark knows, in terms of like he was obviously visited by Milchek, and he knows that there was like this breach or whatever, but all he knows is what the audiences think has seen, which is the cutting back and forth. And I don't know if he's actually seen Helly's face and when he cuts back and forth there, or if it's always been Gemma from his perspective. Because I do think he certainly seems to recognize her in some form or fashion here. But I don't know for sure.
Okay. We'll figure it out as we go on, or we won't.
Yeah.
And we'll just get to the end of the show and be confused. Speaking of being confused, did you know shoving a giant needle into your brain can cause you to be confused, Tom? She shoves that needle so deep in, and this is Dr. This is the good doctor's attempt to flood the chip, and then she tapes his head, and I was like, yeah, that tape will fix it. I didn't like any of this, Tom. I don't need to see needles going into brains.
Thankfully, he's got a big head of hair that can kind of cover it up.
Sure.
But yeah, it was a lot more graphic than I was anticipating this whole sequence to be, but I loved the tension and everything that they built and the way it was shot of her slowly going in there with that needle. It was brutal to watch. But
Yeah.
then again, what does she do, right? Because she just floods it, hemorrhages it. I don't know what this means, but it seems to be. Is the end goal? I guess here's my bigger question: is the end goal for Mark to be able to, like, recall every memory from each of his Innie and Audi self, and then essentially live one life? Is that the idea?
I don't think so. I think the goal here is for them not to be able to control him with the chip in his brain. I don't know that he's going to get memories of both sides. I think it is simply, you are no longer going to be able to be severed anymore. But that might mean, a collapsing of the memories, because she does talk about that, how like the time will close and then the memories will, be in real time, or it's all gobbledygook, Tom. I don't know.
So it's like when he goes down the elevator, he'll have to kind of pretend that he is now Innie Mark,
Yes.
based on his knowledge of both memories converging.
Yes, I would also argue maybe he just doesn't go down the elevator anymore. He leaves this wild, desolate place and lives his life elsewhere with Hannah, his dead wife. Anyways, I love that the doctor failed to mention to keep his head still. He has like the seizure thing, and she's like, you really can't move your head like that. And I would have been like, you did not tell me that I could not shake my head, so that's on you, good doctor. Devin shows up, and I feel like Devin has shown up in some questionable moments, and I don't know how to put this, but I am starting to get the vibes. In the Truman Show, whenever the friend shows up or like the wife does something because they're all in on it, I'm not saying Devin's a traitor, because we've seen Devin and Rickon, like we have scenes with them outside of Mark, like where Mark is not there. So if the show would be tricking us if Devin was a plant or not really his sister or any of those things. But I do find her timing impeccable in some of these moments.
Yeah, and even their dichotomy back and forth of Mark kind of saying he's trying his own thing and not including her. Like, I thought they were kind of on the same page with trying to figure out a way to take Lumen down. So it's odd that he's going through all of this without consulting her. Or is the idea that he realizes this is wildly dangerous and Devin wouldn't like sign on for it, so he's not telling her?
Yeah, maybe that, but also I think there's been information leaks. He's been betrayed by Helena. I'm not saying he doesn't trust Devin, but he doesn't trust Devin, so he's not going to tell her.
Okay.
I think twofold probably, because she'd tell him not to, and also he doesn't know who she's working for. Whatever he tells her might end up in Rickon's next best-selling novel.
True.
All right. He then faints and foams at the mouth, and I was like, oh, if they killed Mark right now, this show would be the dopest show in the world, but I don't think they did. And then over his foaming body, Devin and Ragabi are like, hi, nice to meet you. I'm his doctor. And Devin's like, oh, you do good work. And the foam continues.
Well, she does work. I wouldn't know if I'd call it good at this point.
The doctor's like, oh, I just gave him a pill that was to make him do this exact thing, faint and foam at the mouth. So good to know it's working. He took an Alka-Seltzer. Anyways, let's cut to the Bert, the Irving, and the Fields of it all. And I appreciate the show, like, putting us in an intimate setting of a dinner and then really kind of giving us an outer world perspective through this dialogue in terms of, like, we get the story of how Bert ended up with Lumen, and so we find out that there is a Lutheran church outside of this. Jesus Christ exists in this world. And so I thought this was interesting how the show used these guys to kind of paint in some added color for the universe we're living in, if that makes sense.
Agreed. Absolutely.
And so Fields, did you recognize Fields, Tom?
He's definitely a guy I've seen in multiple things, but I couldn't tell you where I spotted him.
Tom, if he would have picked up a small tomato and bit it with his mouth and the juice would have squirted out while a hobbit sang a mournful song, I think you would have recognized this actor.
Ah, okay, brilliant. Lord of the Rings, love it.
Yeah. It depends in which the manner you return. He's the steward of Gondor, and he loves tomatoes. Anyways, so this actor's fabulous. I enjoyed Fields. I thought, once again, we were dealing with, hey, what is an innie, what is an outie? We find out that the church, the Lutheran church, believes doctrinally that innies have souls. And so we get this story where I guess Bert was a bit of a wild child and considered himself irredeemable. And so he decided to get severed so that his innie can go to heaven. I found all of this wild and just a lot of bad theology. This might have been written by someone who, I don't know, ever picked up a Bible, but it doesn't matter, Tom. It's still fun.
Listen, it seemed pretty good to me.
Oh, I think it's important to say that I'm pretty sure biblically no one is like past redemption. I'm pretty sure the whole message of love is part of it, but it is what it is.
But they do a thing about, I think it was Fields that says it. He's like, it's almost like the pastor was listening to our conversation when he said that innies do have souls. So this to me makes it seem more and more of like Lumen being, like they say Lumen is listening, right? So they might have like planted this pastor or planted this seed of redemption into Bert or Field's ear for this procedure to happen. I feel like there's just the way this is all worded, the way it's put together, it's creepy.
Yeah, they recruited Bert in the way that Bert needed to be recruited, which was through religion, which I think is interesting. And so I could have spent an hour at this dinner because Fields slowly gets a little bit more drunk and a little bit more angry. And this is cut into a scene of the frolic dude, his name being
Drummond.
And he is rifling through Irving's footlocker. So the question is, Tom, was there more to this dinner? Is this dinner a transformer, Tom? Was there more to it than meets the eye?
I mean, yeah, Drummond comes with his mountain of keys. I didn't really know where he was at first, but when he starts kind of going through all of Audi Irving's research, I guess, we kind of find out that, yeah, like maybe it's Bert, is it Fields that are taking Irv away so they can do this extra digging. Like even at the end of this whole episode where Bert is kind of like saying goodbye to him and kind of staring out, I almost want to say they're playing like menacing music and he's staring in a way that almost seems like Audi Bert is betraying Audi Irving here. Is that your take or what?
I can definitely see it. I think they plant a couple of things in this conversation that would lead to us believing Fields and Bert are certainly not being honest to Irv, because Fields makes mention that Bert had an old partner 20 years ago that was severed, and Irv chimes in with, Severed's only 12 years old, which Bert then readdresses.
Right.
When you're caught in a lie and you have to double down and you do it right before the person leaves with leftovers at the door, Bert does that. So I thought that was interesting.
Because to me, that read like Bert is the one trying to cover it up, and not that Fields has no idea. Fields is just saying what exactly, right? Okay.
Right. While they made Fields unpleasant in this, I did not feel like Fields. It almost felt like Fields was a little bit bitter that he could see Bert tricking Irv, if that made sense. And Fields seems like he's just, I guess, uncomfortable or not enjoying whatever it is that Bert is doing. And some of that manifests, him talking about them sharing vessels as innies, which, was a wonderful, wonderful first dinner conversation. I'll just say that.
Well, Fields at one point says, what's mine is yours. So, he comes to the conclusion of this, throuple-ish kind of concept where, yes, your any versions of yourselves had a relationship, and I get that. I'm not trying to take that away from you. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, we leave with Bert and Irv kind of having a moment of, hey, would you like to meet again? And it's with Fields, without Fields. So there's some forbidden love happening with these guys as well. A lot of forbidden love in this episode, Tom.
I'm for it.
A lot of bidden love too, though. So that's something, right? Anyways,
I don't think it is.
Did you have any final conclusion or any other questions you feel like we can be confused by before we leave this episode?
I'm sure there's plenty that we missed or didn't kind of talk through. I'm obviously very interested to see what's going to happen with Mark, because now we've seen the reintegration. We've seen it kind of slowly come to fruition, but now that they've upped the game and, flooded his mind, or the chip, what that will actually mean, because we got 4 more episodes left in this season. So if we could end this season with Mark being fully integrated, I think that would be pretty rad.
I would love it if we get some more progress on that. If they just make him a vegetable for an episode and we go about our Lumen stuff. I would like to check in with the neighbor and the lady that was in charge of data refinement. We have not seen her in several episodes, Tom. Is she
Cobell? Yeah,
is Cobell going to make a reappearance, do you think?
She has to, right? She's too big of an actress. There's too much that they did with her in the first season. She's got to come back. And I'm with you. We knew she maybe was done with Lumen when she got in her car and ran away from Helen at there, but I would have expected some form of her coming back into the storyline.
Tom, what if the end of this show is just her coming back with a rad gun and solving everyone's problems with firearms? What would you think about that? Would that be a clever ending? We've seen shows do that before. A lot of gunfire solves a lot of issues, it seems like, in television shows.
Listen, I'm all for a good action scene, but I don't think that would be very, very satisfying for the show.
No, it would not. All right. For those of you that have been listening, we appreciate you. You can reach us at teambingepodcast@gmail.com. If we said anything that had offended you, please write Tom. If you would like to praise us, you can write me. Tom, what are the other things that I have forgotten?
Yeah, follow us on the social medias, Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram, Threads, at Team Binge or at Team Binge Podcast. And if you could be so kind and you're enjoying us, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It really helps us share the show. And we have had a pretty fun audience that's been more engaging with this show, which makes sense because it's a wild show with plenty of mystery. So, again, thank you for those who have just joined us on this podcast. And please go check out our back catalog. We have a lot of other fun shows we've covered.
That's true. We do. For Team Binge, I have been Julian.
And I have been Tom. Till next week, everybody.